Welcome everyone to Thursday's video. Well arrived, today it's a day for historians because today, on August the 25th, 442 years ago, the War of Portuguese Succession came to an end. The Spanish won in the Battle of Alcántara and brought about the Iberian Union, which united Spain and Portugal under the same nation for about 60 years. Now, talking about history, there is also something that Blizzard might learn about the history of their decision making, because what we have for today is yet another round of nerfs to lower Karazhan. This is now, I think, the third or fourth set of nerfs in about a couple of weeks to the dungeon. I didn't like too much the initial justification from Blizzard. We wanted to give players time to relearn mechanics in returning dungeons before making large nerfs. I think this is quite weird, given how everyone very quickly realized the difficulty of lower Karazhan. Not to mention, we already saw the numbers, we already saw the data in how harder it was at all levels. We just had the ending of the NA qualifiers for the Great Push, and you saw keys like Junkyard being pushed all the way up to plus 35, while groups were struggling clearing 28 keys or 29 keys in lower Karazhan, and then you had the average player, which was struggling to even complete plus 15 keys in lower Karazhan, so it was already very well known that this was a very overtuned dungeon compared to the rest. So Blizzard is rounding up another set of nerfs to the dungeon. Almost all of the bosses plus a good amount of trash mobs gets significantly nerfed overall. A whole bunch of skeletal ushers have been removed from the Opera Hall path. You have gotten the nerf to Demoralizing Shout, now being a 3-second cast instead of a 2-second cast, which is very important because it reduces the damage you do by 20%, which is something you don't want to happen, right? A whole bunch of abilities have been straight up removed from the possible casts of the enemies, like Phantom Guardsman no longer casting Shield Smash, Ghostly Chef no longer casting Cleave, Ghostly Baker no longer casting Rolling Pin, etc, etc. So a whole bunch of nerfs to the trash, plus a whole bunch of nerfs to the bosses. We have already had a couple of days ago the nerfs to the Wicket boss that was significantly nerfed. Now we also get a nerf to Westfall Story. The Shank initial damage is reduced by 20%, the Dashing Flame Gale initial damage and the damage over time is reduced by 30%, and the Thunder Ritual damage is reduced by 30%. What's also more is that a boss that was somehow skipped in nerfs previously, which was Moros, has the Garrote damage reduced by 15%. The fix with its timer not displaying properly has also been fixed now, and then you have further nerfs to Atumen and Maiden of Virtue, particularly Maiden. Maiden now has the DOT on the ground that you have to step in to get rid of Repentance stun is reduced by 20%, and Holy Bulwark, the absorb you need to break after you get incapacitated, has been reduced by 15%. This was already nerfed by 10%, and now it's been further nerfed by 15%. So this was an attempt to bring the dungeon a little bit more in line with the rest, given what we have seen so far across all dungeons. I hope that this is not going to repeat itself in Dragonflight. You know, Blizzard is going to have quite a bit more time to make sure this is not going to happen. But in case you have forgotten, in Dragonflight we are getting the same treatment in the first season of Dragonflight like we have gotten now, which is half current dungeon plus half older dungeons. If you haven't really kept track of these news, Blizzard is still planning to have 8 new dungeons in Dragonflight. They are all going to be playable in normal, heroic and mythic 0 difficulty, but once you enter Mythic Plus, there is only going to be 4 of these new dungeons available. The other 4 will be left for the following season, so for a few months in the future, and what instead is going to fill the Mythic Plus pool of dungeon is 4 older dungeons from older expansions. Two of which we already know of. One is Court of Stars from Legion, and the other one is Temple of the Jade Serpent from Mists. I just hope that we're not gonna go through this type of balancing that we have just gotten when in Season 4 we've got the 2 Karazhan dungeons which were very clearly overtuned compared to, for example, the Mechagon dungeons, which were, if anything, they were undertuned compared to the average difficulty of the other dungeons. So let's hope that they can take this experimental season, which is exactly the reason why they came out with this set of ideas for this season 4. They take this season of balancing all their dungeon properly into Dragonflight, and we don't have to suffer through this weird flimsy balancing of the dungeons in Dragonflight. Talking about Dragonflight, I think it's worth starting to analyze this. We have gotten the release of the alpha of Dragonflight on July the 14th, so now we are about a month and 10 days, close to a month and a half into the alpha. Of course, as usual, I still don't have the alpha because clearly Twitter e-celebs deserve to be in the alpha much more than me, but triggering aside, we have to point out that the initial release of the alpha was followed by Eon's comment about how they were planning the schedule of the alpha to be in 6 weeks, to be in 6 builds of the alpha, 6 future builds after the release of the alpha, which also followed the release of the class talents. We have gotten a few class talents before the alpha was released, because we have gotten Druid and Death Knight, I believe, were the first ones to be released, and then we have gotten one after the next in each alpha build, with a couple being released at once halfway through the alpha. And now today or tomorrow, I'm not sure, I'm coming from the past right now, there should be the Demon Hunter Talent 3 out. So with this final build of the alpha, we have gone through all of the classes. Blizzard has also already upscaled, they have increased the level, the max level of the alpha to be the max level in-game, level 70. So we currently have max level in the alpha, we have all of the class talents available in the alpha, so most of the base stuff has been out, which is exactly what points towards the soon release of the beta of Dragonflight. This is going to be relevant because, number one, of course, the beta, once the beta comes out, it's going to start launching, it's going to start sending invites to way more players. That is when you want to start testing the features of the expansion on a larger scale than the alpha. The alpha is more or less just an advertisement tool. Most of the testing will be done in the beta phase of the game, but also because once the beta comes out, those are the times where you start getting into Mythic Plus for testing, when you start getting into raids being open to testing. So generally speaking, that is when you can start seeing a more clear picture, a more open-ended picture of how the expansion is shaping up to be. This last week was also the first week where you could be at max level and you could start toying and looking at the end game content, especially in the open world. You know, the world quests, the extra open world activities you could do also started very recently in the alpha. So as we get into the beta is when you can start to see the more clear picture of the expansion, which is why I think it's a good thing that it's coming out sooner rather than later. My guess was the beta was going to come out the week after the last of the alpha updates for class talents. So Demon Hunter comes out this reset, so the beta comes out the week after. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, there is going to be a break. There's going to be a 1 week break before the release of the beta. So basically after this week, after this alpha build bringing out Demon Hunter, there is going to be an extra week, an extra pause week in the alpha, and then 2 weeks from now is when the beta is going to go live for Dragonflight, which would put the date between August the 31st and September the 7th. Now, if we assume that the expansion is to come out somewhere in December, this would mean from early September to early December, which is a good 3 months worth of time in the beta. So this puts the time for the beta at roughly, more or less, 90 days. This would be in comparison with the 185 of Mists, the 136 days of Warlords, the 110 days beta of Legion, 108 days for BFA, and 126 days of Shadowlands. So on average, the average is about a month to 40 days shorter of a beta cycle compared to previous expansions. Then again, you might have seen yourself a few comments from players in the alpha pointing out that the expansion does indeed look like it's pretty far along the development. It doesn't look like it's terribly behind, and clearly 3 months of beta won't be enough to test everything before the release, so it doesn't even look that bad anyways. So with this point being done, I am eagerly awaiting the beta, as I am assuming that is the time when I will finally get into the game itself. Thanks again to Blizzard for leaving me out dry for almost 2 months. Very well deserved for not leaving the game and going to play Final Fantasy for a year. Thank you very much. Now, with this being said and done with no triggering whatsoever, we can leave each other to the rest of this Thursday. Thanks as usual to all of my patrons for supporting me. You are helping me in continuing to produce content for WoW, even without an alpha. It's been tough, but it's been manageable so far. You can also support even more by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. That is also very helpful as far as YouTube goes. And finally, for further social connections, you can follow me on Twitter, right down at this link, as well as subscribing to my Patreon, right down there. Now, out of my contractual obligations, we can actually leave. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I have to go raid. I don't know for what reason exactly. This season's raiding has been, unfortunately, not very exciting to go through without too much at stake.